Imagine a 7-year-old playing alone in the woods, miles from home, with no phone and no GPS. Today, that's grounds for a police investigation. In the 1970s, it was just Tuesday. There is an undeniable quality that distinguishes those who came of age in the 1970s. This specific decade didn't merely influence a generation, it actively forged a singular brand of psychological resilience and self-reliance that modern developmental experts are only recently starting to fully appreciate. We often operate under the flawed assumption that optimal childhood development requires maximum oversight, more structure, constant guidance, and layered protection. Yet the generation of the 1970s provides compelling evidence that this theory is fundamentally incorrect. Consider the scene. You are 7 years old, finishing breakfast, and your mother issues one non-negotiable directive: be home before dark. There was no GPS tracking, no mandatory hourly check-ins, and certainly no schedule filled with pre-planned adult-led activities. The day was surrendered entirely to you, your neighborhood cohort, and the unlimited scope for independent choices. Whole afternoons were spent constructing elaborate forts deep in the woods, or inventing intricate games using nothing but sticks and shared imagination. Disputes were settled internally, without a single adult intervention. When injuries occurred, handling them was your responsibility. Boredom necessitated invention. Conflict demanded resolution. You worked it out yourselves because there was no one else present to do it for you. This parental hands-off policy was not a sign of neglect. It was a profound expression of trust. Neuroscientists have since confirmed a remarkable truth. This type of unscripted, spontaneous play literally optimizes the brain's architecture for creativity and critical thinking. It is the crucible where executive function, the crucial ability to plan, adapt, and reason without continuous external direction, is truly forged. Imagine cycling through the neighborhood, noticing the Johnsons' car parked at an unusual time. You quickly mastered the art of reading the social terrain. You instantly knew which yard permitted shortcuts and which one guaranteed a shouted warning. You could discern whether the older kids were in a mood conducive to letting you join in, or if you needed to immediately make yourself scarce. This acuity was not paranoia. It was essential survival intelligence. Navigating the world without constant adult safety nets cultivated a powerful sixth sense for situational awareness. You developed the capacity to assess genuine risk, make instantaneous safety decisions, and gauge others' intentions purely from body language and tone. Researchers label this hypervigilant social awareness, which sounds clinical. But in reality, it was simply paying acute attention, making you sharp in ways modern children, whose every social interaction is often interpreted and narrated by parents, rarely become. Picture 3:30 on a Tuesday. The school bus drops you off. You walk to the house, retrieving the spare key hidden beneath the flower pot. Unlocking the door and stepping inside brought no sense of fear, only the quiet sound of your own footsteps and the low hum of the refrigerator. You dropped your pack, prepared your own snack, perhaps turned on the afternoon TV and started your homework, occasionally using the landline to contact a friend. This recurring routine was not an experience of loneliness, it was an affirmation of competence. Every single afternoon, you validated your own capability to manage those unsupervised hours, proving you didn't require constant surveillance to thrive. When problems arose, there was no reflex to seek external blame or a fixer. The default question became, what can I do differently? Psychologists define this as an internal locus of control, the fundamental belief that your own actions dictate your outcomes. For 70s children, this wasn't an academic concept. It was simply the operational reality of their lives. A fall meant getting up. A broken object required figuring out the repair or the explanation. This profound self-reliance became bone deep. But consider those moments when the homework was done, the allocated hour of television was consumed, and 3 hours still stretched before dinner. You'd inevitably wander into the living room, interrupting your mother's folding of laundry, and utter those two fateful words, "I'm bored." The universal parental response was immediate and concise. "Go find something to do." That was the entirety of the solution. No smartphone, no tablet, no instant digital fix. It was just you wrestling with that restless, itchy sensation of inactivity. You might end up simply staring at the clouds outside, meticulously reorganizing your card collection for the 4th time, or calling a friend who was equally bored, allowing you to be bored together until inspiration finally struck. You learned early on that boredom was not a crisis requiring intervention. It was a vital signal, a gentle nudge from your brain preparing itself to innovate. Where contemporary parenting often treats boredom as a disorder, demanding immediate remediation, you learned to tolerate it, to let it simmer, until an idea inevitably emerged. This tolerance for discomfort persists today. These are the individuals who can comfortably sit in silence without reaching for a screen, who can wait patiently in long queues, and who handle uncertainty effectively because they internalize the lesson that not every moment requires external stimulation or immediate answers. Intriguingly, research indicates that people who experienced regular periods of understimulation in childhood possess brains that are more active in areas governing creativity, self-reflection, and innovative thought. Boredom, effectively, taught your brain the skill of generating something from nothing. This brings us to the big oak tree down the street, the one with branches sturdy enough to climb until the ground looked impossibly small. You climbed those high trees, the kind where a fall guaranteed more than a scraped knee. You rode your bicycle without a helmet, the wind whipping past as you flew down steep hills, hands off the handlebars, simply because it felt exhilarating. You built questionable skateboard ramps and jumped off bridges into murky water. And yes, sometimes you sustained injuries, scraped knees, twisted ankles, maybe a broken bone. But through this direct consequence, you developed an essential internal calibration system, learning firsthand the difference between genuine danger and mere perceived fear. That tall tree taught you precisely how high you could ascend before the branches became too unreliable. That bike jump taught you the difference between a thrilling landing and a trip to the emergency room. This was not thoughtless recklessness. It was wisdom forged through lived experience. While other generations might hesitate when faced with ambiguity, 70s children learned to rapidly assess and adapt, understanding that some risks are inherently worthwhile because they have personally survived the consequences of both overcaution and boldness. Psychologists term this a calibrated sense of risk. For you, it was simply knowing your limits because you had already tested them. Then came the weekends when plans fell through or friends were unavailable. Saturday morning stretched ahead, empty, quiet, and boundless. And crucially, that was perfectly acceptable. You could lose hours in your room immersed in comic books, constructing intricate scenarios with toy figures, drawing, or reading a favorite novel for the 3rd time. You took solo bike rides, explored the neighborhood independently, or simply spent an entire afternoon in contemplation. This was not isolation. It was a profound sense of contentment with your own company. You quickly learned that constant external validation was not required for internal security, that being alone and feeling lonely were separate, distinct states. The independence thrust upon this generation cultivated an unexpected asset, a deep, almost supernatural capacity for solitude. These are individuals who can spend entire weekends alone and emerge feeling recharged, not depleted. They don't feel the need to fill every moment with social interaction or digital noise. What researchers now recognize as critical for mental health, the ability to self-soothe and be comfortable within one's own mind, was simply your standard mode of self-entertainment. This self-mastery translates into adults who approach problems distinctly, manage stress uniquely, and navigate relationships with a specific emotional intelligence that is increasingly scarce. This intelligence was often earned in the most unexpected moments. Maybe something negative occurred at school, a harsh comment, a test failure, or a difficult fight with a best friend. You would lie on your bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling that hot, constricting tightness in your chest. Anger, shame, disappointment. Crucially, you lacked the tools for immediate distraction or external processing. You couldn't instantly text a friend for advice, scroll social media for validation, or even call someone because the landline was occupied by your mother. Therefore, you were forced to simply sit with the emotion. You retreated to your room, perhaps punched a pillow, and allowed the feeling to run its course until, inevitably, it subsided. This was not emotional repression. It was the development of intrinsic processing. You learned that emotions are temporary visitors, not permanent residents. You could feel disappointment without spiraling into catastrophizing, and you could experience conflict without needing immediate resolution or external reassurance. What psychologists identify as emotional self-regulation, one of the most robust predictors of success in both professional and personal spheres, was simply the process of sitting quietly with your own difficult feelings. Those who grew up in the 1970s rarely seek constant reassurance because they developed internal mechanisms for managing their emotional states. They learned that feelings pass, that discomfort is survivable, and that not every emotional state demands immediate action or external intervention. Now, consider the sheer depth of anticipation required to wait for your favorite television program. You didn't just passively wait. You planned your entire week around ensuring you were positioned in front of a screen to watch it. And when the episode concluded on a nail-biting cliffhanger, you accepted the mandated 7-day wait for resolution. This natural rhythm of anticipation and deferred reward was not a conscious lesson imposed by your parents. It was simply the structural reality of the world. And it created something immensely powerful: the profound ability to wait for worthwhile outcomes, understanding innately that anticipation sweetens the ultimate payoff. Modern minds are typically hardwired for instant gratification, immediate information, instant streaming, and next-day delivery. Your brain, however, learned a fundamentally different cadence. Christmas morning possessed its unparalleled magic, specifically because you waited 365 days for it. The first day of summer vacation felt incredible because it was earned through 9 months of schooling. A new, cherished toy mattered because you had diligently saved for it. Researchers have shown that individuals capable of postponing immediate pleasure for future rewards exhibit lower rates of addiction, higher academic success, and significantly more stable relationships. The 1970s generation received this crucial training organically integrated into their daily existence. You weren't consciously learning delayed gratification. You were merely living in a world that operated slower, and that reality rewired your capacity for patience. Yet, even patience didn't eliminate difficulty. Recall falling off your bike, knees gushing blood, hands badly scraped. Your parents observed the scene and offered a simple directive: "You're fine, get back on." So you did. You lost the neighborhood baseball game, striking out with the bases loaded, feeling that crushing disappointment. And the very next day, you played again. Your science fair volcano failed to erupt. Your book report earned a C. You were cut from the team, or forgot your lines during the school play. Each time, you felt the unmistakable sting of failure. But here is the critical distinction. There was no assembly of adults rushing in to preemptively soothe your hurt feelings. There was no participation trophy to soften the blow. No grade inflation existed to artificially protect your self-esteem. You failed, acknowledged the negative feeling, and then proceeded to figure out what adjustments were needed for the next attempt. This was not parental cruelty. It was the rigorous process of resilience building. While other generations might succumb to paralyzing self-doubt after a professional rejection or relationship failure, 1970s children possess an unwavering internal voice that asks, "What did I learn from this experience?" They automatically treat failure as valuable feedback rather than a defining identity, because they learned young that falling down does not define you, getting back up does. This isn't just resilience, it's what modern philosophers call anti-fragility. The stress and chaos didn't just maintain you, it made you stronger. This resilience was equally crucial when navigating the intricate social world of childhood friendships. Imagine the park on a summer afternoon without any adult refereeing the dynamics. When a friend promised to meet you and didn't show, you alone had to decipher whether they forgot, were intentionally angry, or had an unforeseen conflict. When two friends fought, leaving you caught in the middle, you had to navigate that complex emotional minefield independently. If feelings were hurt during a game, you were obligated to figure out how to make amends without a teacher or parent mediating the situation. This environment forced you to become a highly astute student of human behavior. You learned to instantly read micro-expressions, that subtle tightening around someone's eyes indicating they were upset, even if they claimed to be fine. You could sense tension building in a room before anyone else registered a problem. You grasped that people's words and their true intentions were often entirely separate entities. You knew precisely which friend could handle a joke and which one took things deeply personally. You mastered group dynamics, identifying the natural leader, the peacekeeper, and the agreeable follower. You instinctively understood when to push back, when to let minor issues pass, when an apology was due, and when to firmly stand your ground. There is a common misconception that less supervised childhoods produce antisocial or emotionally stunted adults. In reality, the opposite occurred. These children were compelled to develop sophisticated, advanced social skills because they navigated complex peer relationships without the safety net of adult intervention. They learned to decode tone, interpret subtext, and understand that the bulk of human communication occurs beneath the surface level of actual conversation. Decades later, many of these same 1970s children find themselves in their own homes, observing their children struggle with a challenging homework assignment or a difficult social conflict. They feel the powerful, instinctual urge to intervene, to fix the problem, to smooth the path. But they resist. They offer their children the necessary space to make and own their mistakes. Not because they lack care, but because they inherently understand that overprotection breeds anxiety rather than genuine safety. They recognize that children must successfully navigate manageable risks to build authentic confidence. When their child fails, the instinctive response they inherited is not accusation, but the measured inquiry. What do you think you could do differently next time? Because that is the question they learn to ask themselves. They consistently prioritize competence over transient comfort. They hold the deep conviction that temporary struggle fosters long-term strength, that friction builds character, and that independence is the ultimate source of security. These are not mere philosophical concepts read in a parenting manual. These are neural pathways carved deep through decades of lived experience. These individuals carry within them something profoundly rare in our hyper-connected, overstimulated modern world. A quiet, unshakable confidence born from knowing they possess the internal tools to handle whatever life presents. Their brains were literally rewired by freedom, strengthened by the crucible of boredom, and precisely calibrated by risk. They stand as living proof that perhaps we have significantly overcomplicated the fundamental task of raising resilient human beings. That sometimes, the greatest gift is not shielding someone from struggle, but equipping them with the capacity to navigate it entirely on their own terms. Which of these 70s lessons do you think is most missing in today's world? The boredom, the risk, or the freedom? Tell us in the comments.